Today in this video, I'm going to show you 15 terrible habits that can damage your image and ruin your relationships. Hi, how are you? I'm Juliana Santiago, and in this video, I'm going to show you terrible mistakes people make during a conversation. I think if there's a way for us to notice if someone has manners, has good behavior, if we can really tell if the person is actually present in that moment, right? And not with their mind somewhere else, it's during a conversation. It may seem very simple, but when you're there in front of someone, a lot is noticed. The person can tell if you like them, if you're interested in them, in the things they say, in the ideas they share, if you really pay attention to that person, if that person is important to you. So even during a simple conversation, when you're getting to know someone, a lot is already said about you, and the person can already form an image, a perception of who you are. She can already build that according to the information you offer to this person. Today in the world, we live in a very digital world, right? So many times communications are done right there on the phone, sometimes in a meeting via video conference. But we need to understand that when we are there face to face with someone, whether at a party or in a work meeting, we do need to maintain certain standards for a good conversation. Especially at social events, because many times when we are going to talk about something in a professional environment, we are concerned about maintaining a good conversation, listening to the other person, waiting for them to finish a sentence. But in a social conversation, sometimes when you talk to someone at a wedding, at a bar, at a dinner, at a restaurant, you often lose track and end up coming across as someone who doesn't let others speak, whose voice is always the most heard, right? And your voice has to be the most heard in the room. So for you not to build that image and to show, a little empathy, some care, some consideration for others, stay with me until the end of this video because I'm going to show you the terrible mistakes people make. By the way, at the end of the video, I want you to comment on which of these mistakes you think is the worst and which one you see the most out there. I really want to see your opinion. The first point is cutting people off. Wow, for me, there's nothing more unpleasant than talking to someone and having them interrupt you all the time. Many times people interrupt because they already want to share their opinion. They want to give their point of view. Many times it's because they even end up finishing the story. Sometimes because they already know what you're going to say, so they end up completing what you're saying. Or many times people also interrupt because they want to talk a little about themselves. So this mistake is also very common. Sometimes people end up interrupting a train of thought when someone is telling something, right? When someone is there talking to another person because they want to talk a little about their own experience. They want to say they've been through it. They kind of jump ahead in the conversation. When you do this, what you show to other people, the feeling that people next to you get, is that you want to be the center of attention again. So when someone tells you something, when someone shares something with you, wait for that person to finish telling their story, to finish speaking, and then if you want, you can share what you did in a certain situation, or even give your point of view, actually talk with the person. You can even interrupt someone when you really want to ask them something. Sometimes you get curious about a certain point of what they're saying, but if you have the habit of cutting people off just because you're impatient, you don't have the patience to listen to others. Be very careful with that. Another point as well, another terrible habit that people have is making sarcastic little laughs. These little laughs when someone tells you something are very dangerous. Many times, when you have the habit of laughing when someone tells you something, well, if it's something funny, it makes sense for you to laugh. But if you laugh just to be funny or to seem a bit sarcastic, to show that you have a sense of humor, be very careful. People may feel bad when they notice that you're laughing right in front of them. it may seem like what they're saying doesn't have value, that what they're saying isn't being heard. It's like the person belittles your thoughts when they laugh, you know? So be very careful. And it's very dangerous to make those little jokes because often the person might not have the same sense of humor as you. So if you're in an environment where you know people like that, they already know you, they know that's how you are, it might even make sense. But when you're talking to someone for the first time or someone you're not very close to, be very careful when making jokes and giggling, things that might come across as sarcastic. Another point quite similar to the first is interrupting someone. Many people have the habit of finishing other people's sentences. You know, when you're telling someone a story and the person sometimes even reads your lips along with you, this mirroring is very common in body language. Some people do this a lot. For example, I cross my legs and you end up crossing yours on the other side. Movements that I make, you end up making too. But be very careful if you have a habit of talking even with your mouth closed when the other person is speaking. And especially when you actually speak and finish sentences that the other person is mentioning or concluding. So wait for the other person to speak. I know that many times in some cases stories can be repetitive, but be very careful when someone is going to tell you something. And even if you know the ending of that story, respect it because it may be that other people present there still don't know what was shared. Another terrible habit people have during a conversation is looking away while the other person is talking to you. When we talk about a conversation, we have two or more people interacting. So the person who is speaking, it's essential that they feel like they're being listened to. It's not just about saying, oh, I understand, oh, I understand. No, you need to show them that you are actually paying attention, right? Show her that you understand and are attentive to what she says. And what's the best way for you to show that? Through eye contact. So make eye contact. When someone is there talking to you, telling you something, explaining something, look at that person. Be careful not to keep looking to the side, paying attention to other things. Sometimes a cat walks by your side like this. Look at the cat. So be careful not to show that. That's a huge lack of respect, and one of the main keys to a good relationship for the person to feel good when they're with you is for them to feel that you care about them, that you're interested in them. People, in general, human beings, they want to feel important, they want to feel loved and cherished, right? That's just part of human nature. That's why when you show someone through a non-verbal language, and we're talking about eye contact, it will definitely make the person feel really good around you. If you show her even without saying any words that she is important, you bring something really good into her. She feels very special. So this factor, this involvement of making the other person feel special while they're with you is one of the keys to behavior and will certainly greatly improve the perception, the image, and the interpretation that people have of you. And of course, if you believe that etiquette and good behavior can help improve relationships between people, you're here on the channel and always watch the videos. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you just got here now, if you arrived through this video, subscribe and take the opportunity to like the channel. Recommend it to your friends if you have WhatsApp groups. Do you believe that etiquette and good behavior are things that are missing in our society? Nowadays, join this movement. Share this video with those you believe should also be a part of it. Don't forget to follow us on our social media as well at Etiquette and Protocol. Another terrible habit during a conversation is if you move your body in a way that's too restless. So be very careful with that. You know when you're talking to someone and the person keeps spinning in their chair the whole time? You know those swivel chairs and the person keeps doing this the whole time? Or sometimes the person fidgets with their pen too much, keeps playing with the pen like this the whole time. Sometimes they tap their feet too much. Sometimes they keep tapping their hands too much. Try to control these habits you have. I know that some people really have this habit in a stronger way, right? It's something that's even uncontrollable. So, if you have this habit in an uncontrollable way, try to also notice what makes you act this way. Because sometimes it's something that will help you to pay a little more attention and observe with more care. But if you do this just out of impatience because you're bored, be very careful, because this shows the other person that you're completely absent, totally distant, not present in the conversation, and that's not the image we want to create. Another terrible habit is also people who act like what? Teachers. These are people who know everything. So be very careful if you have the habit of talking. And when someone starts to talk to you about a subject you already know, an experience you've already had, or a trip you've already taken, be very careful. This is very common, for example, in the world of motherhood. Sometimes a mother is there sharing her experience, and more experienced mothers end up dismissing her thoughts. Oh, I already know that. Oh, it's like this. Wow, that's silly. Don't worry about that. Be careful when showing someone that you already know what they're going to tell you, that what they're telling you isn't adding anything to you, that you already know that story, that you already know about that, that you've already been through that experience. Of course, you can share your experiences with others, especially if the other person gives you a certain freedom, but you've certainly been in a conversation where someone acts like a teacher and knows everything. If it's a trip to Disney, the person has all the experiences, all the tips, and instead of just giving advice, alternatives, or tips throughout the conversation, they're simply interrupting the other person and saying they already know it's like this, or they already know it's another way. So be very careful with that, This kind of approach, way of speaking, habit, it's very dangerous. It ends up being extremely annoying for those who are there with you. Another point, which is also a habit related to that teacher-like behavior, is the person who monopolizes the conversation. We need to give space for other people to speak. After all, a conversation isn't a monologue, right? It's not a lecture that you're giving to other people. You're there having contact with another person, relating to someone or more people. So it's essential for you to give space for other people to talk, for other people to have a conversation. This, by the way, is a habit that people who are sometimes more extroverted, people who are more communicative often have. And it's important for you to notice this in case you are in this group. Because if you are a more communicative person and you have the habit of talking a lot, many times you might make the mistake of not letting the other person speak. You become that person whose voice is always the most heard in that group. Only your opinion stands out. Only your points of view are heard. So be very careful with that. There's also a factor that I think is fundamental nowadays. And I see that it's a bit lost. It's the lack of empathy for the feelings and pain of others. Many times we're there in a conversation, exploring a more intimate side, or sometimes sharing something, and an experience that we've been through. And many people, sometimes because they haven't gone through a similar experience, or even because they've already been through it and got over it a long time ago, think that your pain is small, that your pain is insignificant. So be very careful with points of view that might diminish what someone else feels. It's that same example I mentioned to you about mothers. Sometimes a mother who just had a baby, she's there, sleepless at night, and all she wants is to vent, to talk about it. And then the other friends, the colleagues, the other people in the group come and say, wow, don't be like that. Are you really feeling this way? But you've barely started motherhood. You should see when the tantrums start, when you have to take off the diaper, when you have to take away the pacifier. The person doesn't feel the other's pain. She simply downplays what the other person is feeling. At times, she doesn't downplay it, avoiding phrases like, oh, that's nothing. She doesn't use such explicit phrases because deep down, we already know that's impolite. But sometimes we downplay someone else's pain with other comments, like the one I just gave you as an example. Or, for example, someone just told you that they're studying a lot in law school. Then you go up to them, you're a graduated lawyer, and you say, you don't know anything, you're just studying. What you're doing right now is nothing. You'll see when you start studying for the bar exam. Maybe to study for the bar exam, you really will have to study a lot more, but it's important for us to feel the other person's pain. Respect the other person's experience. Just respond, wow, law school really is pretty complicated. You'll do well. Gradually, you'll find your rhythm. You'll see that you'll get the hang of it, and then you'll do great. Little by little, the semesters will get easier. They'll become simpler for you. So feel the other person's pain. Be gentle with what the other person says, and be very careful with those comments, Those comments that aren't actually aggressive, but they really downplay what the other person feels. Another terrible habit is also those people who always try to be superior to others. The person who always tries to be superior is usually also the one who monopolizes the conversation. But the person who tries to be superior often not only monopolizes, as I mentioned before, but also has the habit of always wanting to be better at everything. So it's that person who has the best salary, who was given the best opportunities, who is always living in the best place, whose building, whose condominium is the best of all, whose job is at the best company. So it's that person who creates, even without realizing it, a competition in the environment they're in, because she always wants to put herself first. Many times it can even be a competition where she's competing in a kind of solo way. But she stays there during that conversation, creating this air of competition and showing off that she's the best at everything. Her opportunities are the best, her children are the best, her grandchildren are the best of all. So be very careful not to be in that place during a conversation. It's a little different from the person who monopolizes the conversation, because not always does the person who monopolizes a conversation want to be in first place. Sometimes she just wants to be the center of attention. So I think you can see the difference. A person who sometimes monopolizes a conversation is that person who is always talking. And the person who likes to be superior is the one who likes to be number one in everything. Of course, many times these two people end up clashing and become just one person. But it's important for us to avoid these habits and observe each one of them individually, because you might have more of one, less of the other, and then we can adjust all of that. Another point that I also think is a very common habit is when someone dismisses the contribution that the other person made in the conversation. Let me explain to you how this works. For example, you're there, you talked and shared something about your life, an experience you had, a trip you took, and the other person wants to contribute in some way to that conversation. They want to reinforce, they want to point out, some experience they had, and you simply downplay the contribution they made there. Then you might say, wow, but what you're talking about was in Italy many years ago, right? Because recently I traveled to Italy and it's not like that anymore. Wow, the restaurants are much better, much more sophisticated. In fact, there are some new restaurants, and those ones you mentioned, wow, they used to be good, but now they're terrible. It's that person who dismisses what the other says. Of course, the way you communicate with people, the tone of voice you use, the way you express yourself, your gestures, and your expressions will make a big difference in how others interpret you and the feeling you create when you're around other people. That's why knowing how to behave isn't limited to, for example, just knowing how to talk. You have mastery over your behavior as a whole. No, human behavior is fragmented into various aspects in different situations and in several ways, especially in the interpretation and nonverbal reading that the other person has of you. And etiquette certainly helps us understand more about human behavior, what the best practices are, and the best way to conduct ourselves in different environments. That's why we have a course here at the Institute of Etiquette and Protocol, where I am a co-founder, which is the Etiquette and Good Manners course. A course that has already been taken by thousands of people around the world who are seeking to develop the best behavior. Whether at parties, events, work, or the table, right? Having good behavior at the table, electronically as well, virtually, because there's a whole way of communicating too electronically, right? Following the rules of digital etiquette. And it's important for you to understand and master this. And one thing I like to emphasize is that when you understand the standards of etiquette and know how to act and behave, people naturally start to see you differently. They start to notice you more, listen to your opinion more, and this opens doors for you both personally and professionally. So, if you're interested in joining our courses and have never taken a training with me, I have a coupon code YouTube that you can use on your first purchase on our website and join the Etiquette and Good Manners course. The link is in the video description. I'll see you there. And coming back to habits, a terrible habit is people who ask too many personal questions. Especially when you are just getting to know people or starting a friendship, the beginning of a relationship with those people. Whether it's in groups, at work, at a party you attend, or a new group of friends you just met that you were introduced to. Be very careful when asking too many personal questions. There are some people who are very intrusive in our lives and end up asking about topics that are extremely sensitive. So when you talk to someone, avoid asking, for example, how much they make, if they have children or not, or if they are married. Wait for them to share and tell you a bit about their experience. This will certainly make a big difference, a huge difference in building that friendship, that relationship, that connection you're developing with that person. Another terrible habit that people have is when they're in a conversation and they just stay silent. I notice that this habit is more common among shy people. But it's important for you to understand, if you're in a conversation, in a group discussion, if you're there, you need to show that you're present. That's why reinforcing some points of view, mentioning something that's being discussed there, will be essential for the person to really feel that you want to participate, that you're there. That those people, that environment there, are interesting and important to you. Never stay too quiet. When you stay too quiet, other people might feel that you're not interested, that you don't want to connect with them, that you don't want to open up, that other people are too uninteresting, and they'll think that you're a rude person. And now, do you want to know what habits rude people have? What are the signs that show you're a rude person? Click here on the side and watch this video next, where I explained all the signs that show you have no manners. And now, at the end of the video, I want to know which of these conversation habits I mentioned, which of these 15 habits do you think is the worst? Comment below because I want to know, okay? A kiss and see you in the next video.